Well, hey there, and welcome to Unmistakably You. Happy Wednesday. I'm Amy from Unmistakably You, joining you as always Wednesday nights at 8 o'clock. And tonight, you don't have to just listen to me talk because I am joined by a very special guest. Hi, Anne. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you, Amy?
I'm doing very well, thanks. It's been a beautiful October day that it sounds like we're not going to get very many more of. So I spent some time on the deck, which was awesome.
Well, I'm glad. There's nothing like
Yeah.
summer in October.
If it could be this way all year round. Anyway, would you like to just give us a little bit of a quick overview of who you are and talk about the wedding ring just briefly?
I'd love to. So my
Fantastic.
name is Ann Warren, and I'm the Director of Operations for the Wedding Ring. The Wedding Ring has three divisions. So we're the weddingring.ca, your local online planning resource. And by local, we really do mean local. We feature local vendors, local fashions, local finds, local content. Everything that you'll see on our site, you'll be able to find in the city that you're in. We also have the Wedding Ring magazine that we publish twice a year. It comes out in September and it comes out in January. Again, staying focused on our local content, local information, local vendors, local couples. And of course, we have the Rings Wedding Expos that we host from London to Niagara, KW to Hamilton. And again, keeping that focus on local couples and local
Mhm.
vendors.
And you do so many beautiful things and connect people with incredible local vendors, which is, as a vendor, something that is just such a valuable service. So Anne has agreed to join us tonight to talk about wedding shows specifically, or wedding expos, however you would like to, whatever verbiage you would like to use there. But Anne does run the wedding ring shows, and we've got one of those coming up. When and where is that, Anne?
So the Rings London Wedding Expo is Sunday, October 22nd at the Best Western Lamplighter Inn. That will run from 11 a.m. until 3 p.m.
So we thought with that coming up soon, it would be a great opportunity to just kind of talk you through, if you haven't had the opportunity to attend a wedding show, maybe you're newly engaged, maybe you've been engaged for a while. We thought it would be a good opportunity to fill you in on the who, what, when, where, why, and how of wedding shows. So we've talked kind of about the most the what am I even trying to say? The next upcoming one being the Ring Show on the 22nd. And we at Unmistakably You will be vendors there. So we're excited about that. There tend to be sort of two rounds of wedding shows throughout the year. There are usually some fall ones and usually some early spring ones, often January. And do you want to maybe just kind of let us know timing and why those kinds of times tend to work with engaged couples?
So, absolutely. So, our cycles tend to be, as you said, fall. So, some shows happen in September, but the majority of them do happen in October. And typically that's because couples finally get back into their own planning cycle. So over the summer, they helped their friends celebrate their weddings. They enjoyed their vacation. They barbecued. They enjoyed all that summer had to offer. But when September hits, much like back to school, we get back into a planning zone.
Mm.
And so we typically find that while our September shows do well, our October shows are really where the brides and grooms do the best planning. They have an opportunity to meet local vendors. They have an opportunity to connect when it's fresh in their minds and they're ready to go. Typically, a fall season, we would see the couples who are planning for next year or who, are just starting to get into their planning cycle. We also come back again in January, February, and sometimes into March, kind of depending on where in the province you're located. The smaller shows, say Woodstock and places like that, would tend to have their shows further into the springtime, so April or May. And of course, the further north you go, you'll want to have your show later in the spring as well, just because weather can be a factor sometimes. Um, in the January, February, March shows, typically what we're seeing is those newly engaged couples who are coming out, who don't know where to start, and are typically chatting with our venues first and foremost. If, however, you are planning a 24 wedding, it is an opportunity for you to fill in those last little bits. So, maybe you have all the basics planned, but you're suddenly wondering if you need day of coordination. So you're chatting with Amy, or perhaps it is adding on a photo booth to a well-planned reception. So there's no wrong time to attend a wedding show. We just typically find that the best times for us to host them are that mid-fall and midwinter.
And I think from a vendor perspective, it also tends to align with what here in Southern Ontario is our kind of high wedding season. We tend to be pretty busy from May through to, trickling out towards the end of October. So those shows happening at the end of the season or in the early spring happen typically when we're not quite as focused on weddings every weekend.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
yeah. And in terms of the who, you kind of touched on that. You mentioned that there's never a wrong time for a couple to attend a wedding show. And as vendors, we always like to, here at Unmistakably You anyway, we like to do both rounds of shows where we can, because it's an opportunity for us to connect one-on-one with potential couples and really sort of chat face to face about the services that we provide and how we might be able to help them navigate their wedding plans. But how do you recommend, in terms of the entourage, how do you recommend that couples attack who to bring to the show with them?
Well, really it comes down to a personal preference when you're choosing who comes with you. I think it really needs to be the key players in the day. So if your partner, if your future spouse is keen on taking part in the decisions, then obviously you'll want to have them there. Other than that, I say keep your entourage tight. So make sure it's people whose opinions that you value. If there's somebody in your wedding planning party that maybe you don't value their opinion so much, potentially a mother-in-law or a sister-in-law who's a bit heavy-handed with some of the planning advice, that's maybe a person that you don't want to bring along with you. However, if you're not close with your family, your soon-to-be family members, it is an opportunity to connect as well.
Mhm.
But just keep in mind, the more people you bring with you, the more opinions you'll have. And sometimes it's really like trying to herd a bunch of cats to get them to stay
Yeah.
with you. I can't count how many times the bride will lose her entourage during the bridal show because they've wandered off away from her.
Yeah, I stand and I often talk to a lot of moms, and I stand there for 5 minutes with them while they just wait for everyone to catch up. And you can see them coming down the aisle. And then the mom says, "Oh yeah, there's the bride." Just because it is difficult to stay together. And oftentimes these shows are quite busy. And if you do have a large party, it's easy for one person to get interested in something over there and one person to go talk to this vendor over there. And then things get spread out. So definitely keeping a tighter entourage, as Anne mentioned. And we absolutely love kiddos. I could squeeze cute babies all day, but if you have someone that can take care of those kiddos so that you can really focus on the conversations that you're going to have at the show, you'll be able to really get a lot more out of this show experience, because your attention isn't divided between your baby in the stroller and then the photographer that you're trying to speak with.
Absolutely.
Mhm. So, in terms of the other side of the who that is involved in wedding shows, we've just kind of generically mentioned vendors. Depending on the wedding show that you go to, usually you have a really good blend of the day of wedding service providers and the sometimes even pre and post wedding service providers. So, as a planner, I'm obviously providing services before the wedding. If you're talking about full service planning, we also provide day of wedding coordination. But what are some of those other day of services that you are very likely to see at most expos, Anne?
So I'll speak specifically for the Rings Wedding Expos, but
Hmm.
we try to make sure that we have a selection of vendors from all of the categories of wedding planning. So not just day of, although those are our key and core vendors. So you'll find your DJs, your photographers, videography. Of course, you'll need gowns and tuxes. Hopefully somebody has invited the cake person along so that we've got some delicious samples to enjoy as well. There's decor, and of course there's venues, because everybody needs to have a space to have their party. But then we go a little bit further than that, and sometimes there's future planning. So a mortgage broker, a financial services person,
Hmm.
and of course some of the pre stuff. Oh, and I hope I didn't forget to mention officiants, because without an officiant, you're just having a really expensive party.
Yeah.
So let's make sure that you've got an officiant, and they'll actually help lay the groundwork too. Many of them offer not necessarily premarital counseling, but some pre-planning services to help make sure that not just the wedding, but the marriage is a success.
Very, very important services. And as Anne mentioned earlier, no matter when you're attending a wedding show, there are usually things that you're still looking for, whether it's those last minute add-ons, like perhaps that photo booth to add an element to your reception, or if you're early in the planning and you're still looking for venues and officiants and photography, it's a really great opportunity to connect with those vendors. And I always say that the most important part of a wedding show are those face-to-face conversations. I mean, ultimately, let's be honest, it doesn't really make a huge difference if you're BFFs with the person who's baking your cake, but you definitely want to trust them and know that they are competent and they make beautiful cakes that are, in your realm of aesthetic. But absolutely, those vendors that you're going to be spending a lot of FaceTime with on your wedding day, like your photographer, your videographer, the people who have a dramatic impact on the overall sort of feel of the day, like your officiant, those are people that you're going to want to connect with face to face and know that you kind of vibe and that you feel comfortable with them. So taking a few minutes at a wedding show to actually stop and talk and ask some questions is really, really valuable as a preliminary step. Of course, you're probably going to want to book a second meeting if you find, let's say, a photographer that you really like the look of their work and you've connected on a personal level. You're probably going to want to book another meeting with them. But it's a really good sort of first step to making that connection and perhaps weeding out some vendors that you're just not feeling it, and then narrowing down the field of those that really are going to work for your day. So that's always something that I feel is really a valuable aspect of an expo.
It's also a no pressure zone. So it gives you a
Mm-hmm.
chance to maybe meet those vendors that you were potentially interested in without committing to their services or committing an hour or more of your time to sitting down and chatting with them, particularly if you find that the vibe might end up being off. Back to what you said, Amy, one of the things I always tell couples is that core group of wedding day vendors, your officiant, your planner, your photographer, you're going to spend probably more time with some of these people on your wedding day than you will with your spouse. So make sure
Mm-hmm.
that they're people that you enjoy being around, that you love their style. And a wedding expo is really just that first meeting for them. And where else are you going to meet 50 of my favorite vendors all in one room?
Absolutely. And that's something else too, as the person who's putting on the show, you're curating the vendors that you're able to showcase. And so as a couple coming into planning with, I mean, you don't know what you don't know. And when you look at 50 photographers online, they all showcase their best work. And it's often difficult to know who to weed out just by looking at that preliminary website glimpse that you're going to take. But attending a wedding show, you know that those vendors have been vetted by the person or the people running the show, and they're not going to just allow anyone to have a booth if they don't meet certain criteria.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So an absolute benefit of attending a show is those no pressure conversations. It's also a really great opportunity to maybe get some new ideas, see some fresh, decor themes or things like that. There are lots and lots of just kind of little nuggets that you can take in as you walk through a show. And there are definitely lots of other benefits in addition to those conversations that you get that you can't sort of access from a website. So do you have any other sort of suggestions for couples as, maybe tips and tricks as they might want to apply to attending a wedding show, Anne?
I absolutely do have all kinds of tips and
Mm-hmm.
tricks for you. The first is going to be choose your timing very
Mm-hmm.
carefully. Sometimes our shows are really, really busy, and you maybe don't want to be the person who arrives at 9 a, or excuse me, at 11 a.m. and has to wait in line to get in. Last October in particular, our show was very, very busy and the line was very long. Fortunately, it went very quickly, but if the lineup is not your deal, then stop by 1 o'clock. My favorite time to attend any kind of trade show or event is 2 hours before the event closes. So for example, our show ends at 3 o'clock. I would attend at 1, because then you've gotten past that first rush of people. They've gone in, they've met who they wanted to see, and now you've got time to chat with vendors. Typically, the last hour of any kind of live planning event like this is fairly quiet, and you're going to get all the one-on-one time with the vendors that you want. So really, for me, it comes down to, where do you want to be? There are benefits to coming in first. You're fresh, you're happy, it's before lunch maybe, and maybe you've planned a full day after with your wedding planning entourage. Maybe you're heading out for brunch or additional shopping after. So there are pluses and minuses to different times, but really it comes down to, what's your personality and when do you want to be there? We already talked about keeping your entourage small, or at least tight. It doesn't mean that it's just you and your fiance, but make sure that it's people whose opinions that you really value that are there. We used to give the advice all the time about making pre-printed stickers with your name and contact information on them, so that you could easily enter the draws and contests that vendors were having. And then we decided that we should just make them for you. So that's actually one of the things that we do. If you pre-register for the Rings Wedding Expo far enough in advance, and that is the Tuesday before the show. So if you have pre-registered before the Tuesday and have checked the box that you want stickers, we'll make them for you. This way, you're not getting a hand cramp filling out all of those draws. Make sure that you give yourself enough time to do the show. Like I said, that last hour is great, but if you really want to meet 50 people, 50 vendors, you can't show up at 2 o'clock and hope to get quality time with all of those people. I've had people who stop by the show at 2:30 as we're getting into final minutes, but those tend to be couples who are getting married in the next couple of months and know exactly who they need to speak to. So they're very focused on what they're planning. What else? We talked about leaving kids at home and limiting distractions. Can you think of any ideas, Amy? You're almost as experienced as I am at this.
Well, I just wanted to kind of circle back to what you mentioned about the contact information on stickers.
Yes.
And just kind of advise couples that if you can create a wedding specific email address, that's often a good way to go to keep all of your wedding specific communication in one place. And because if you're going to a show and you are entering all of these draws, I mean, free stuff is great. Nobody doesn't like free stuff, but expect some follow-up from those vendors. And if it's not a vendor that ultimately you're going to require their services or want to work with, at least then their follow-up isn't going into your regular day-to-day email. So you can keep everything kind of confined there. But also with regard to giving vendors your contact information, oftentimes you can leverage specials or promotions that the vendor is running in conjunction with the show. So for instance, one that I always mention is that oftentimes formal wear providers will have some kind of a show special where, if you book in conjunction with the show, you get a free tux rental or something like that. And so if there are specific things that you're looking for, attending an expo can be a really great time to get some additional savings that you wouldn't have otherwise.
I'm going to jump off of that, Amy, and I'm going to take it a step further with the prizes. So most expos themselves offer some pretty great prizing just for attending the expo. And that's over and above what the vendors are offering, including those discounts and prizes that they offer in their booths. Two of the things that we do at our show. So every one of our expos has what we call the show grand prize. So we offer $1,000 online shopping spree courtesy of Wedsy.ca, and you can use that for favors, gifts for your attendants, cake, knife, and server, whatever it is that makes you happy. You'd be surprised how quickly you can spend $1,000 on wedding things. And I have yet to meet a couple who couldn't use an extra $1,000 to spend on wedding things. And we make that draw right at the show at the very end. One of the couples from the London Wedding Expo will win the London show prize. And then we have a season's grand prize. So we give away a honeymoon for two. This time around, it is to a Sandoz resort in Playa del Carmen, I believe. I probably have that wrong. In Playa Car, sorry. I was close. It's the Sandoz Resort in Playa Car, and that's courtesy of Sandoz and North Star Travel and the weddingring.ca, of course. So it is important that you consider what email address you're going to receive your correspondence to. But I also would suggest that you make sure that you check it somewhat frequently. Things that you're not interested in, you can delete or you can pass on. But also keep in mind some of those offers that they have may be time sensitive. So you don't necessarily want to be checking it the night of the show. But maybe the Tuesday or Wednesday after, you'll want a quick little pop in and see if there's anything fun that's come into your inbox.
Awesome. And in terms of digital communication, there's certainly lots of that, but also you have sort of little swag bags for your attendants, correct?
We do. What's the fun in going to a fun party without taking something home? So we have welcome bags that all of our couples get. And I would like to mention, and this isn't necessarily true for all shows, but it is true for our series of shows. If you register in advance to attend the show, your admission is absolutely free, as is the admission for your entire wedding planning entourage. If you're bringing 2 people, you're both free. If you're bringing 10 people, I don't necessarily think that's the wisest choice. However, they're all free as well. Every couple will get a welcome bag, and the bag includes the latest issue of the Wedding Ring magazine. We have some fun things that we added this year. So there's a stress ball and a notebook, and vendors contribute to the bags as well. And those are also free. So is parking. We like to make sure that everything is available for you.
And those bags are absolutely key in collecting all of the materials that you're going to get from every vendor's booth as well. I know that there are often giveaways from each vendor or promotional materials or cards or flyers, and you need somewhere to put those. So that swag bag is fantastic.
So one of the things that I suggest, and there's always some of the other vendors will hand out a nice bag, and I think Moore's does a really nice bigger bag than what we do. I always suggest that you kind of keep 2 bags separate. And it's one of the reasons we started doing bags is because the things that you're very interested in. So we only have the best vendors that attend our shows, but there are going to be specific people who interest you right now. Perhaps you're in early planning stages and you're really focused on photographer and venue first. You'll want to make sure that you have easy access to the contact information or the brochures that those vendors have given you. And having a bag that is specific for that isn't a bad idea, so that you can just make sure that, oh yes, Amy from Unmistakably You, her contact information is right here because I put it in this bag. So just a little thing to keep in mind. And also that notepad and that pen that we include is good for making notes like that as well.
And perhaps sorting through those bags sooner than later after coming home from the show, so that you can kind of make a pile of, yes, I need to contact these vendors, and these ones I perhaps don't require their services.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Well, Anne, thank you so very much for joining me tonight and for sharing some really valuable tips on how to navigate a bridal show or a wedding expo or a wedding show or whatever the lingo is in whatever neck of the woods you're watching from. If you're catching us on the replay, don't hesitate, as always, to reach out if you have questions. I'm happy to answer anything that you can fire my way at amy@unmistakably.you.com. And if people have not yet registered for the October 22nd London Expo, how do they do that?
There are a ton of ways that they can register for the show. First and foremost, just go to theweddingring.ca, click the Wedding Expos button, and it'll take you to a page where you just select the city that you want to attend the expo for, and it'll take you straight to our Eventbrite page.
Awesome. And hopefully we will see lots of you there and in future shows. Yes. And thank you so much as always, and enjoy the rest of your night.
Thank you so much for having me, Amy.
All right. Take care, everyone. Happy planning.
Take care.